What do you look for in a crime fiction festival? Bestsellers? Prize winners? A new favourite crime writer? At Gwyl Crime Cymru Festival in spring 2023, we'll be offering all of these. But much, much more will be available. Because the home of our festival is Aberystwyth, a little town with a long history and a big heart. Once home to Welsh princes, Aberystwyth is now home to the National Library of Wales and Aberystwyth University. The sweep of the town's Regency seafront pulls the tourists in from around the globe. Aberystwyth even offers the chance to watch dolphins as well as crime writers. Festival goers will be able to enjoy gourmet food and drink, as well as delectable discussions of murder, mystery and mayhem. You'll find live music in warm, welcoming pubs, as well as lively discussions on our festival stage in a former music hall theatre, with plenty of authors around for lively discussions of your own. Come and get cosy with the crime. There are hidden alleys and ancient byways to explore where murders might quite easily be hidden, and a funicular railway to take you to the top of Constitution Hill, where you can enjoy the Camera Obscura. And if you stay for a few days after the festival, you will be able to enjoy the breathtaking scenery of Ceredigion. The countryside and coast can be viewed by boat or heritage train, on foot and two wheels as well as four. Whether you love exploring lush river valleys, walking unspoiled beaches, or discovering the history of this beautiful area, Aberystwyth and Ceredigion have so much to offer. So come to Gwyl Crime Cymru Festival next spring. You might just discover your new favourite crime writer, as well as your new favourite town. What do you look for in a crime fiction festival?
Hello everyone, and welcome to this Gwyl Crime Cymru Festival 2022 first event. Welcome to the festival. Welcome back if you were part of the festival last year, and if this is your first time, you are even more welcome. I hope you have a fabulous time throughout the festival as the events go on this week and next week. We're able to bring you this festival through the generous financial support of Aberystwyth Town Council and Literature Wales. So thank you to those bodies for that. Now, one of the things that the Crime Cymru Author Cooperative, when it was set up, was keen to do, was to promote new Welsh writing. So at the beginning of every festival event, we're going to run a 5-minute crime close-up slot introducing new Crime Cymru members. So for this event, the crime close-up author is Alison Leyland, and I'll allow her to introduce herself and to read from her work.
Thank you, Jacky. Hello, noswaith da. I'm Alison Leyland, Crime Cymru member and author of 2 standalone psychological mysteries, which you can see behind me there, both published by Honno Press, with a 3rd on the way. I also write short stories and flash fiction, and I'm a literary translator. I'm particularly pleased to be appearing before this panel, as my novels also feature wider issues as a backdrop to the characters' own problems and, let's face it, a good story. The underlying theme of my debut novel, Someone Else's Conflict, is war and its long-lasting consequences. Set in the present-day Yorkshire Dales, it has a backstory in the Croatian conflict of the 1990s. The main character, storyteller and odd job man Jay Spinney, became entangled in that conflict through links with a friend. The lingering effects of the war for himself and his loved ones follow him, literally, through to the present, with potentially devastating consequences. My second novel, Riverflow, highlights themes of sustainability and eco-protest, subjects close to my own heart. The protagonists, Bede and Ellen Sherwell, lead an off-grid life on their small holding by the River Severn. When their beloved Uncle Joe, a father figure to Bede, drowns in a flood, Bede refuses to believe it was an accident. 18 months later, they're still trying to come to terms with the tragedy when a local landowner threatens to allow fracking on his land. Seasoned protesters, the Sherwells, find themselves on the front line of the campaign against this, antagonising their powerful neighbour and raking up a murky family history in the process. It seems that Uncle Joe's legacy could be more than just the small holding the Sherwells used to share with him. I'm going to read you an extract from Close to the Beginning of Riverflow. Leaving the flooded village, they crossed the bridge. The overfull river felt strangely close. A muddle of debris jostled the upstream side. On their way home along the lane, Bede gazed out of the passenger side window. Wow, look at that. It's a lake out there. Ellen stopped the car. Peering through the rain-streaked windows, she twisted to look back at the stranded bridge, its hump like a prehistoric creature wallowing between the woods on their side and Foxover on the far bank. The water had spread to the fields between river and road and was continuing its ominous swell. In the rain-darkened late afternoon, they could just make out the other side, murky water lapping its way up the village street. It was a relief to get home and turn into the old elite gate. I hope Joe's got a fire going, Bede said as they hugged their coats around them, ready to make a dash for the house. He held the porch door open for her, but Ellen paused on the threshold. She thought she heard the dog barking. It was hard to tell through the wind and rain, but it sounded like it was coming from the field down by the river. Isn't that Kip? Bede called a hello into the house, listened for a moment, then peered out alongside her. The barking was more distinct this time. They ventured back into the rain and hurried down to the yard entrance. The gate across the road was swinging open, and Kip came through, bounding towards them. Frowning, she bent to him. The dog shook his sodden coat, sending out a shower of drops to blend with the rain. What's he doing here? Where's Joe? Without replying, Bede ran across the road and paused at the gate. I can't believe how high it's got. She joined him and saw that the water was fast lapping its way up the young trees of the willow plantation. He grabbed her arm and pointed into the branches to their left. What's that? I saw something move. Ellen didn't look because her eye was caught by a flash of silver straight ahead, down by the waterline, the distinctive V on the back of Joe's jacket. She brushed the rain from her face, horrified to see him being dragged out by a tug of the current towards a large branch that was sweeping by. Joe made no attempt to grab it, swim, or even struggle. Bede, over there! He swore and broke free from her, vaulting the fence between their field and the next, sprinting downstream, trying to keep up with the river flow. But there was clearly no hope of matching the speed of the current. She followed. At the far end of the field, he reached the thick hedge and stopped at the water's edge. She had a horrible feeling he was about to dive in. Stop! Don't do anything stupid! She caught hold of him and they stood, helpless, as Joe and the branch were swept out of sight around the bend. I'll now hand you back to Jacky and our wonderful panel for tonight. Thank you, Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you so much. So, everyone, what a wonderful reading, atmospheric, and getting us ready to think about those secondary issues that often are those issues that linger along with us after we've read our crime fiction tale. The format then, we'll enter into discussion with our authors that I'll introduce, and then we'll take questions at the end. And the wonderful Alice Hawkins, the chair of the festival, she's going to be looking after the questions. So please do put those in the chat box, and Alice will gather those and she'll then bring them out towards the end of our session together. So I hope you're all sitting extremely comfortably and ready for a fine discussion with three excellent authors whose work probes and questions and asks us to consider more than just the crime or the thriller. The first author I'd like to welcome is Trevor Wood. Hi, Trevor. Good evening. How are you?
Hi, Jacky.
Wonderful to see you. Yeah.
Been practicing that all day.
You have been practicing your Cymraeg, and that is wonderful. Thank you. Da iawn. So, Trevor, having lived, it says, for Newcastle for nearly 30 years, you consider yourself an adopted Geordie, and I think that comes out very much in your writing, how much that city and the people of that city mean to you. You're also a successful playwright. You've worked as a journalist and a spin doctor for Newcastle City Council. And I found it interesting to note that before that, you were in the Navy for 16 years, and you were in there as a writer. That I didn't know about you. So yeah, even back then, the writing bug, it was there. You took an MA in creative writing, in crime fiction, that fabulous course that UEA does. And then from that, your first novel, The Man on the Street, award-winning novel, set in Newcastle, was published in 2020. And in that novel, you first introduce us to Jimmy Mullen, Sherlock Holmes, and the people around him. A year later, we get the sequel, One Way Street. And then the final book in the trilogy came out earlier this year, Dead End Street. So thank you for that amazing trilogy.
Pleasure.
Thank you for the voices that you raise in that trilogy. And we're going to come back and talk about that, of course. So bear with me while I introduce the other authors.
Thank you.
Welcome, Trevor. Our next author is Awais Khan. Hi, Awais. Good evening.
Hi,
welcome.
Jacky.
How are you? Are you well?
Thank you so much, Jacky. Yes, I'm very well. I'm in London at the moment, so yeah, always happy to be here.
Well, I am so glad that you're over with us because normally you're based in Lahore, Pakistan, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you were to be there now, you'd probably be having to have quite a late night as we did this. So yeah, so great. So you are a graduate of the University of Western Ontario and also University of Durham. And you've studied creative writing at the prestigious Faber Academy in London. And what I love from out of all that, though, and I really want to mention this, that you teach then, out of all that you've experienced, you now teach a fabulous online creative writing course to aspiring writers around the world. And I think, if anybody is watching, please do check out Awais. Where can people find details of that?
So, it's called the Writing Institute. So it's everywhere on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find. We actually celebrated our 10,000th student.
Yay! Excellent. Yeah. So to turn to your work, your first novel, In the Company of Strangers, was first published in July in 2019, and it's since been acquired by Hera Books, and it'll be republished in the autumn of this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. And film and TV rights have been acquired for that. So watch this space, yeah? I did read that filming was due to start, but I know these things are always a little tricky.
Yeah, it's supposed to start this year. So I'm going to check it out when I go back. I haven't been in touch with them at all.
Yeah. Fingers crossed then, because it's always fabulous when authors that we know, when their work goes onto the screen and we get to experience it in that different format. Your second novel, No Honor, was published by Arenda Books in summer 2021. And there's a third book, and that will be out, I do believe, in 2023. And once again, that's with Arenda.
Yeah.
And in between that, I've read that you have been developing a YA trilogy under the name of A.K. Khan. Is that correct?
Yes, that is very classified information that you've managed to get your hands on.
Trying to be a good detective, yeah?
Absolutely. No, yes, you're absolutely correct. And it's just, I this idea came to me and just wouldn't let me go. So I tried my hand on YA. So let's see where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gave in, and so brilliant.
Yeah.
We look forward to that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, last but by no means least, we have the fabulous Louise Mumford. Hi, Louise.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. I'm coming from the slightly less glamorous South Wales. I'm in Cardiff at the moment, but it is very sunny, which is unusual for Wales.
which is wonderful, wonderful. And again, just to say to viewers, the idea, we know that we were all meant to be in Aberystwyth this year, and hopefully next year we can do that. But Louise, thank you for being that person who's got that hold on the Welsh soil there. Yeah, it's anchoring us into
Jacky, I was born in Bristol, man. That's practically Wales, isn't it?
It's
not, Trevor. It's not. Get back over the water.
Oh, let him for this evening. Let him have that dream. I think that's important. Yeah, definitely. So, Louise, you studied English Lit at university and came away with the first from that. So. Excellent. When you were there, were you interested in crime fiction when you were studying English literature, or were you more towards the classics?
Yeah, it was a very classics kind of heavy course, and Welsh fiction in English as well. So
fabulous.
And this is how bad my maths was, because I'd actually added up the amount of points I'd needed to get for a first, and added up that I wouldn't get it. But clearly my maths was worse than my actual English literature.
Thank goodness that you didn't take a degree in maths then. That's good. You've worked as a teacher. Are you still working as a teacher?
No, I gave up teaching about 4 years ago now. So I was for 15 years.
Yeah, okay. And presumably literature was what you were teaching them, yeah?
Yeah, to teenagers too. So it was very hormonal.
I doff the cap to you, because that what a profession to be part of. Definitely. 2019 though, you have that moment in life where things change with regard to your writing, and you're spotted at the Prima Donna Festival. Yeah, and that's that moment. Since then, for anybody who has not, and I highly recommend that you do so, your debut novel, Sleepless, and it's there peeping behind the chair. Oh, Trevor, here's one that Trevor made earlier. That is impressive, Trevor.
Okay, you can definitely be Welsh now. Okay.
Excellent.
I do have Awais as well, but it's on my Kindle, so it doesn't look quite as good when I hold it up.
Thank you so much.
So psychological thriller, and it's said that it's inspired by your own insomnia. I hope the way the novel plays out that you haven't had similar experiences, but we'll come back and discuss that. So that was published in December 2020 by HQ HarperCollins. It was an Amazon Kindle top 50 bestseller. And I love the fact also that it was the Asda Karen Slaughter Killer Read for July 2021. Yeah? Excellent.
I think I visited every Asda within my vicinity. I know all the best Asdas now around South Wales.
Hey, I know there's sometimes a little bit of difficulty of what supermarkets do and what they're able to do, but I think, if people are coming in contact with books and encouraged to buy books, then for me it's that. However, I've got that little bit religious streak, like St. Paul. However people are brought into the kingdom.
Yeah.
Then I think let there be reading. I think that's really important. Now your second thriller, Trevor, can you do it again?
I can't. It's on my Kindle as well. So
that's on your Kindle, yeah. But the Safe House, and that is out next month, yeah.
Yes, on the 12th.
It's very good though, Jacky. I can testify to that.
It made me think a lot about motherhood and questions about how much should we love our children and protect them. Yeah, tricky. Can I just ask, Louise, will you be having a launch?
I'm going to do an online launch with one of my D20 author friends.
Yeah.
The group that we all published in 2020. So Victoria Dowd, I'm doing an online launch with her. And I'm lucky enough to be able to do a little launch in my local library, because now it's not lockdown anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We can actually support the library. So it'll be brilliant to have kind of all my friends and family to be able
Brilliant.
to.
Which is your local library? Just in case people are watching, who are in Wales and might like to come and join you if they can.
So my local library is Whitchurch, which is in Cardiff, on the outskirts of Cardiff.
Great, thank you. So, wonderful authors, PTSD, homelessness, arranged marriages, the caste system, businesses and online matters that turn out to be something more than they are, and could we call it toxic parenting and trauma? All issues that you've raised in your novels. But before we get into those actual issues, I want to ask you, as authors, which came first? The desire to write crime and thriller stories, or a desire to raise these issues, and crime fiction provided you with the most perfect vehicle to do so? Trevor, do you want to set us off?
I knew you were going to pick me first. Definitely the desire to write came first. When I rocked up at the UEA MA crime first weekend, I realised that every other writer there had an idea about what they were going to write, because the whole idea of the MA was to produce a 90,000 word crime novel, and I didn't, not a clue. So I went home that weekend and sat down with my wife and said, we need to brainstorm very quickly. And in throwing out lots of ideas, I did want to do something that incorporated kind of social realism, if you like. I wanted to write about the real world. I've spent about the previous 12 years co-writing comedy plays. I'd done enough frivolity. I needed to do something a bit more serious. And in amongst our chat, my wife said, what if a homeless man sees a murder? And that sparked something almost immediate. And I thought, that's genius. And so I started to do a lot of research into homelessness and indeed PTSD. And it all sprang from there, really. So it was literally a one-line throwaway comment that started it.
It shows as well, I think, that idea of never, always be listening, always be aware of what might be going on around, because it could be the seed from which, and for you, Trevor, it was the seed from which this phenomenal trilogy, has come into being. Yeah.
It just sparked something straight away. I thought I was already interested in homelessness to the extent that I had a lot of friends who just seemed to ignore people who were in the streets, walk by them. And I always didn't. And I quite often got comments about, you may as well just buy them the drugs straight away rather than give them the money and things like that. And I couldn't really understand where that came from. And I also, once I started researching, when I discovered that they think roughly about 10% of the homeless are ex-servicemen, as an ex-serviceman myself, that was the other thing that kind of really brought me into it. I just wanted to work out how it was possible to go from at least a level of competency and efficiency to living on the street. So I wanted to tell that story as well. So I was hooked immediately.
But you're heavily involved with the People's Kitchen as well.
Yeah, I wasn't right at the start. So when I started researching, I realised my main character is an ex-serviceman. So I realised I could write an ex-serviceman. I found a fantastic book about PTSD, which I might talk about later, maybe, which covered that. But I knew I didn't know enough about actually being homeless. So I started volunteering at the People's Kitchen in Newcastle, which now feeds about 200 plus people every single day of the week. So I work as a volunteer chef on a Tuesday afternoon, starting at 2, working till 6. We have 4 hours to knock up a 3-course meal plus a vegetarian option for 200 plus people. It used to be 100 before lockdown. Numbers have grown.
Yeah, and is the pit stop in the novel, is that
Yeah,
based on
absolutely.
the People's Kitchen, yeah?
It's pretty much the only thing that I've fictionalized in the books. As you know, Jacky, the books are set very much in real world Newcastle. But right from the start, I was never quite sure if somebody in the kitchen might turn out to be villainous or I might want to do something monstrous with them, and I didn't want to upset the people who work there, so I fictionalized that. So yeah, the People's Kitchen is definitely the basis for the pit stop in the books.
Thank you. Thanks, Trevor. Awais, for you, so a writer or a literary activist, could we say?
Well, I think to some extent it's always the writing that gets you started. But for me, I really did want to shed light on what was going on in Pakistan, because you see, Pakistan, there's so much swept under the rug in Pakistan. They're like, no, don't say this about Pakistan, don't say that about Pakistan. You're maligning the image of Pakistan. And I get so much criticism from people who accuse me of maligning it. But they're only the 1 or 2% of the population. So what about the 98 or 95% of the population? Who's supposed to speak for them? Because they're actively living through something like, honor killings and all of that. Even today, I mean, a lot of Pakistan's population is still rural. So who's going to be their voice? I mean, if I just appease a few people by, showing a very rosy image of Pakistan, then where does it leave the other people? So yes, I think, a little bit of a literary activist. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to come back and ask you about, the reception of your books at home, because, I think that sense of when you do shine a spotlight on things that maybe, a nation, isn't necessarily proud of or that has difficulty with, I wonder then, and, and again, I'm going to ask all of you about that how people have reacted to those stories. So thanks for your response, Awais. Louise, for yourself?
Yeah, well, it was the character, so the writing first, definitely. So my main character is called Thea, and I think as you do when you start out writing, I mean, anyone who says that characters aren't based on anyone they know or themselves at all, I think is probably stretching the truth a bit. So giving her the insomnia that I sometimes struggle with seemed like a no-brainer, and it was just a nice opportunity to portray insomnia in a more realistic way than it's often portrayed in films and kind of in books, often by people who sleep very well. They kind of go, oh, I've had a bad night's sleep, but I'm fine, I'll just go and solve this mystery now. And it's not quite like that. So but then actually finding out more about big tech companies and that side of it was an offshoot. It was something I didn't actually expect. It was where the story kind of went. And it became such an eye-opener to find out about the chokehold that the big tech companies have over every aspect of our life. And if there's an aspect of our life they don't have a chokehold over yet, they're coming for it. Yeah. And it does make me sound a bit like a conspiracy theorist, but it's incredibly true, and it is incredibly scary.
Especially with Alexa, that's what I feel. She's like literally governing people's lives and they don't have any idea.
The problem is that technology moves so quickly and embeds itself so quickly that government safeguarding struggles to catch up. So they're always on the back foot, and technology's always got the upper hand because it's usually already been taken into people's homes and hearts and lives. So
I read something recently, Louise. Actually, it was in another crime book called A Question of Guilt by Bjorn Blair Horst, set in Scandinavia, but there was some stuff in there where it said that they had tried to bring in all kinds of ways to monitor the population, and the protests had made them stop doing it, but now the population signs up to be monitored by agreeing to pretty much anything. So we basically just allowed ourselves to be monitored. It's fascinating.
There's a line in Sleepless that said, for example, the ship on privacy that sailed, we haven't got any privacy. Even if we think we have, we don't have any privacy. But there are still other stands that we can make. It's not completely hopeless. Technology does not necessarily have to rule us all.
I wonder how many people might have decided to say farewell to Alexa. Is it that she becomes so ingrained in your life that you can't do without her, or is it like, no, I need, we need to be free of this,
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I only got a smartphone about 2 months ago, Jacky, for the first time.
The biggest form of surveillance is your smartphone.
Yeah.
It's with you all the time. It's listening all the time, even when you've turned off the supposed listening.
It's the weirdest thing. You think about something and you see it on YouTube. Literally, I'm like, it's like maybe monitoring the brainwaves as well now. So I don't know.
But I thought that was interesting, Louise, how in The Safe House, the novel that is about to come out, and so the idea of this mother who goes off grid, and tries to keep herself and her daughter away from all these influences, and yet. So yeah, there we are, and so I just like to say to the powers that be that are listening, you're there, and crime fiction is fabulous. Do some reading of it. Now, so can I ask you then, these issues that you raise, I wonder when you were tackling them in the writing, did it trouble you? As you delved into it and the research that you did, were you left often, and I know we talked about insomnia, but were you left troubled and maybe a little sleepless about these things? And did the writing of these issues, did they bring some form of catharsis? Once you'd dealt with the book, were you able to say, okay, it's still something that matters to me, but I think, I can lay it slightly to rest? Awais, how was it for you? Was the writing catharsis, or are you still troubled by the issues you've written about?
I think if you're troubled by something you're writing, then I think you're onto something good, because if you're writing about a social issue, it should trouble you, because it's literally happening in real time to so many people out there. So the fact that it's troubling you means that you'll write it well. You'll write it better than anything you've ever written. So yes, I mean, it does trouble me, but I'm also glad to see that because of No Honor, so many people who had no idea that these kind of practices existed in Pakistan know that these exist in Pakistan, and it's like a veil that's that's taken away from something. So it is cathartic as well, because you feel like you've done your bit, and now it's up to other people to take up the mantle. But yeah, it's kind of like both things at once, I think. So,
yeah. Trevor, was you mentioned about how amongst your friends they seem to walk on by, but for you, this was an issue. Has the writing helped you with that, and has your writing changed any of those friends' attitudes?
I think the latter, definitely. I mean, whether my friends or not, but certainly other people, the number of people I've had come up to me at events, or even at the People's Kitchen, and say, I've started to talk to people now, I don't walk by them. They may not give them money, but they might give them some food. They might just have a conversation, which is primarily what these people want. They just want to be recognized as human beings and not ignored, really. So they've definitely had a positive effect on other people. I don't know if they've had a positive effect on me. It's still a fairly depressing situation. As I said, the numbers at the kitchen where I work have doubled in the last 2 years, certainly. There's literally no sign of any improvement in the housing provision for anybody at all across the entire kingdom, I think. And that is something that still concerns me. In fact, the new book I'm writing, despite being nothing to do with homelessness, has a kind of running theme about how second homes have destroyed the economy in small towns, which I know is very relevant to a lot of Wales as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's still running in the back of my head somewhere, because this book is nothing to do with homelessness, but that's quite a big theme in the book now.
Yeah, and it is still there. Yeah. Thank you, Trevor. Louise, for you, has the writing cured your insomnia?
Oh no. It's great because I talk to people like, oh, so do you sleep really well? No, I don't know. I wish I could have cured my insomnia. I'm better with it. I think like with everything, you begin as you get older, you start to have better coping mechanisms. And obviously not being a full-time teacher, having to get into school at 7:30 was a bit of a stretch. So that's probably helped me a lot. In terms of technology, seeing as I've got my phone right next to me, clearly I've not learned anything from what I've written, but I think I'm on a slightly losing battle because technology is everywhere. And technology isn't inherently evil. It's what we as human beings do with it that can make it then a little bit suspect. It has the potential to be amazing. We live in a generation where children have access to more knowledge than my generation ever did. Possibly more opportunities. They have more online communities, which can often be very supportive and helpful. So actually, there are huge positives to technology. It's just unfortunate there are also huge negatives to it as well.
If you can't sleep, Louise, do you write? Do you get up and write?
I don't get up and write unless it's really bad, because then that wakes me up and I'll be up all night. You generally, the advice is you get up and you do something, you just read, but not something that's too, twisty or hard to follow, just something very gentle, and you just don't beat yourself up about it. You just accept. It's a very kind of meditative way of dealing with it. You accept the next day is going to be a bit rubbish. You can get through it. You've got through it before. And then your body kind of just relaxes a bit. And it's very much linked to anxiety, I think, insomnia in many ways.
Awais, so I mentioned that I'd like to ask you, as we're talking about how people respond to what we've written, and I wondered back home, how have your books been received?
For the most part, I think the reception has been really good. I think everyone is entitled to their opinion, so I have had my share of 1-star reviews, some pretty scathing reviews as well. But yeah, and a lot of people go ahead and tag me in them as well, which is not right. But otherwise, I think I've been pretty fortunate with all the love and praise I've gotten. The problem is that a lot of Pakistanis don't read. We are a country of 220 million people. And selling 2,000 copies of a novel makes it a national bestseller. So you can just go ahead and imagine the kind of readership we have. But then again, there's so many people who read pirated books. So we don't really know what the exact readership is in Pakistan. But going by Goodreads and stuff, I can tell that most people have liked my book and they try to support me on Instagram and everything as well. But I mean, of course, I do have my share of critics and people who accuse me of showing the evil side of Pakistan to white people, whereas I should be showing the progressive side of Pakistan, which is true. But progressive side aside, you can't really deny the reality just because people in the cities or people like in clusters in the cities, because the city again it's so huge. Lahore alone has a population of 12 million and Karachi has a population of 25 million. So these cities also have clusters where people are privileged, but for the most part, people are living well below the poverty line. So what about them? That's what I always think. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll show good image of Pakistan, but what about those people who are suffering, who are going through this in their everyday life? Who's going to be their voice? So I try not to let the critic get to me then.
Because I'm thinking as well that your work also, it looks at the caste system, does it not?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think again for those of us, I mean, we have the class system in the UK, so I think we're familiar with the sense of hierarchy, but to be able to understand that in another culture, that is what I found so fascinating. That almost that extra element to your story that was so rich. Because it's easy to misunderstand how things work elsewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, Jacky.
Yeah, no, thank you. Now, so we've heard you are all very passionate about these second stories. They, you've included them, they mean things to you. But I wonder, have you found yourself needing to edit certain aspects of what you've been looking at, or when you've worked with your editor, have they said to you, now hang on, you know, you don't, this isn't a soapbox. This, you know, this is a crime, this is a thriller novel. Are you able to find balance, or do you need a helping hand from the good readers and the editor? Louise, what about yourself?
I think every writer needs a helping hand from a good editor, in my opinion. I think having an editor, for me, has been just a brilliant experience, because they have almost without fail pinpointed the stuff I kind of knew didn't work, but I didn't know how to articulate it, or hadn't started thinking about how to fix it. It was quite interesting at the end of Sleepless. Obviously, I was talking about one woman, a young woman, who's going up against a massive, you know, corporate company. I didn't really see that she could survive in that situation realistically, but I had huge pushback from my editor and my publisher there, because the readers are expecting some sort of very clear ending, usually not that the main character dies horribly. So I did have to I really had to compromise on that. It was really tough. That was probably the hardest thing I've had to do. So on one hand, I wanted to make it very realistic, but on the other hand, and also it was in lockdown then, it was coming out in lockdown, and I really didn't want to put out in the world this incredibly nihilistic ending when we were already experiencing a dystopia at that point, mostly made out of toilet roll. So I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though, isn't it, that it's, you know, the editors, but also what is going on at the moment and how that can influence, you know, how we allow our stories to develop, or how we think, oh, I'd better rein that in. You know, and I wonder if Sleepless were written, you know, and not released during COVID, you know, would it have had a maybe, I don't know, maybe not such a tragic end as you were.
Well, I think after the 2 years we've had, it would have had a very depressing ending. Any joy of life has been beaten out of us over these last 2 years. I'm really happy with. I was really glad that my editor said what she said, because it was a really good point, and one that I wanted to work on.
Thank you. Trevor, were there things that you felt were best left out for the general reading public, or was there no holds barred and you just give it as it is?
I don't think there were, actually.
There is one, Trevor. What do you never do to your dog?
Oh yeah, of course. You can't kill the dog. Jimmy had the dog. You know, despite the temptations to make his life even more miserable, I never quite made that step. So yeah, you can't kill the dog. But I think because the story, my three main protagonists are all homeless. They don't have time to politicize the issue. They're just trying to survive. So they do what they have to. So they don't make big speeches about, you know, how everything's terrible. They're just getting on with it and living from day to day. So you don't get any of that. I guess I more had to compromise the other way, really, because The Man on the Street, the first one, was written entirely as a standalone book. It was never intended to be a series, because I wanted to write this book about a homeless guy who sees a murder. I didn't envisage him being somebody who then sees another murder and then gets involved in another murder. That's kind of cozy crime on the telly. It's not what happens in the real world. So I had to be strongly persuaded by my editor that there were a couple more books in the series. I mean, I managed to persuade them that there were only 3, because otherwise it would start to get really silly, I think. And I wanted to keep it as real as possible. So I more had to compromise the other way. I had to kind of accept that I was going to bring these characters back a couple of times and embroil them in a situation where they could somehow influence how a crime is resolved.
Thank you. Awais, for yourself, I'm wondering, one novel cannot a nation change, especially a nation that is so vast. But I wonder, since, you know, the release of No Honor, have you seen, I mean, both home and abroad, have you seen debate grow around your writing?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a lot of debate abroad. A lot of people have reached out to me and told me how much the No Honor has affected them as as a person, and how much they liked it or whatever they didn't like about it as well. That some people throw that in as well. But yeah, as far as Pakistan is concerned, I don't think that there has been any change in the government level, because I just heard about there was a very high-profile honor killing of a social media celebrity in 2016. She was murdered by her own brother in cold blood, and her brother went scot-free just I think this earlier this year, because it's up to the parents to decide whether they'll what they want to do, up to the family to decide. And obviously the family let him go, and he was out, and he's out and about. So I don't think that there's been any sort of restructuring in where the government is concerned. But yeah, people are talking about it, and the Pakistani population, they're very vocal on Twitter, they're very vocal on social media in general. So they do make a bit of noise surrounding these issues now. But how much impact it has, like in the long run, that's hard to say. But I think I feel that I should at least do my part.
Yeah, and thank you for doing so. Now, so I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to ask one last question to you all, and then Alice, please do come in with the questions there, Alice. My last question, I was talking to some authors last night, and I asked them this, that when you write, do you write amongst the characters? Are you there in the novel? Or do you sit above the text and do you see the pieces moving? So are you in with them, or are you above it and making those pieces move and change? Louise, how was your experience? Are you in there, or are you above it?
I never see the pieces moving. It happens. I don't really plan that much before I write. Mm-hmm. So this idea of looking down on something that you kind of know where it's going, I have no clue. I'm just in the dark with a really bad candle, and I'm kind of just fumbling my way through. It makes it really difficult. It makes it really easy to write because it's quite fun. And oh look, this is happening. And then when you've got it all done, and you look back on it, that's when the hard work comes in, because that's where you've got to make sense. I quite like bumbling about with my characters in the dark, because then when the surprises happen, it surprised me.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll surprise the reader, because I didn't see it coming. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Awais, are you there with the characters, or are you like some puppet master moving things around?
I sort of wish I could be a puppet master, but like Louise, I literally fumble in the darkness with my characters. I'm totally engrossed with my characters, to the point that I don't even see what the rest of the story is, what's happening in the rest of the story. I remember there was a scene in The Company of Strangers, and I was so engrossed in that scene that when my editor took a look at it, she's like, "What's the point of this scene?" I'm like, "I don't know. It shows such an ugly side of Pakistan's police department." She's like, "That is not relevant to the main plot at all. Edit it out." That's when I realized that as authors, we just get right into the life of the character and right into the mind of the character, and I just I wish I had that sort of expertise where I could, sort of be the puppet master. I'd love that.
Trevor?
It's unanimous, Jacky, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, when my editor says, "What's the point of that scene?" I said, "I don't know why you're asking me. Ask Jimmy. He's the one who wrote it. He gets on with it." I'm like, I was going to say I'm like a ventriloquist, but I realize I'm more like the ventriloquist dummy. I literally just put on the screen what they tell me to.
Yeah, that mouthpiece for the character. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I like Louise. I have no clue what they're going to do next, and they just suddenly go off at a tangent, and I'm like, God, I didn't know it was going there. Damn, I'm going to have to rewrite the first 20 chapters now to make that work. So no, I'm entirely immersed in my characters' lives, and I let them run riot, basically.
I think, just to close on that piece, I think it is very clear from the way that the three of you, that you create your characters, that these are not, I'm going to call them people, that are held at arm's length, but that they are people that very, very well, and it is a delight to read the characters. You know, even though you have people going through very, very difficult things in your stories, that it is a delight to be able to understand them. So thank you for that. And Alice, may I hand over to you with audience questions?
You absolutely may, Jacky. Hello, everybody.
Thank you. Hi.
That panel. We've had some great questions in, and they've come from all over the globe, from Toronto to Ynys from Calgary to Zakynthos. So amazing audience for us today. So I hope you've all enjoyed. To kick off with quite a chunky one, there were two people who asked almost the same question, Henrietta Hart and Mared Lewis. So I'm going to read Mared's question. How do you avoid the trap of being issue-led, possibly to the detriment of the story and character? Who wants to kick off with that? Awais is looking very pensive. Go on, Awais.
I was actually trying to avoid it, but anyway.
Never look pensive, Awais. Bad mistake.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I think it's. I think being a storyteller is so important when you're writing something. I think being a writer is one thing, being a storyteller is quite another. But if you're a storyteller, then you don't have to worry, because at the end of the day, your focus will be on the storytelling. I mean, yes, things can be issue-led as well, but I think it's in the editing stage when you realize whether you're giving too much emphasis to the issue and too little emphasis to the characters. So I think editing is very important. I mean, self-editing. Of course, when you have an editor or whatever, that's a different ballgame. They'll shred the entire thing and make you redo it. But I think as far as an author is concerned, you can do a lot when you're editing your work. So yeah.
Trevor, Louise, do you agree with that? Is it all about the edit?
If you start with the character, which it seems like we have definitely, and you're creating that character, you are naturally not just going to always be on it, because people aren't always on a soapbox about whatever it is that they're worried about. They have normal lives and they interact with others and they have funny moments and all that sort of stuff. So I think if you start off with your character, you can't really go too wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, really. I don't think I really have issues in my books at all, really. I couldn't think of a single issue apart from the overriding theme, if you like, that the characters are homeless. None of them are on a soapbox. There are no politicians trying to do anything in any of the books. It's simply about how these people survive on the streets. So I think the only comparison, I guess, in the first book, I deliberately set the book around the time of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So there's a lot going on in the city where they're preparing for a visit of the Queen and clearing the streets. So I guess I kind of shoehorned a little bit of politics in there about how much money was being spent on that and how little was being spent on everything else. But I don't really compare the two things. It's just happening in the background, if you like.
Thank you, guys. That's great. Question from Dino. This is quite a deep question. A lot of crime novels obviously focus on the crime, yet the torture that forever is a problem is the process that leads to the resolution or to court, such a long and challenging journey. Should this area be covered more by authors as an acknowledgement to such issues? Because you hardly ever do see that, do you? The journey to court. Once the perpetrator's been caught, it's like, great, it's all wrapped up now. What do you think? Do you think there's a crime novel out there that actually starts with that and actually goes through the torture, as Dino says, of the CPS and the detectives and indeed the victims to show what it's like?
Do you remember Murder One? It was a US
show.
Wasn't that the kind of process of, I think it started, didn't it, with the perpetrator and he's in court, and then it took it from the lawyer's point of view, and it was massive. It was a hugely long series, and it took it all the way through that kind of process to the final verdict, and that kind of sprung to mind as soon as you were saying that, really. So it is a fascinating side. For my books, obviously, big tech isn't going to be hauled in front of any court anytime soon, so I don't have to worry about that. Over to you guys.
I think there are police procedurals that deal with kind of the majority of that. possibly not right from the beginning of the crime being committed and then all the way through. But I think none of us write police procedural, so there's nowhere for us to go on that. I mean, my homeless guys stumble around trying to work out what's happened to the people around them, but they have no powers. They have no ability to take anybody to court or to decide that they're going to be prosecuted. So they just do their best to try and work out what's going on. In a similar way to Awais as well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't write a police procedural to save my life because they're so hard. but yeah, I have read a few novels. Defending Jacob, I think one of them, where you sort of go through the trial and the court procedure and everything. That was a very, very compelling novel. And yeah, I've read a few actually. A lot of them come to mind, but Pakistani judiciary system is so it's a bit similar to the UK because that's where we got it from. But then again, I don't understand it at all, and I don't understand police procedure. Pakistan is all about bribery, so as long as you bribe the police, then you can get away with anything. So that's perhaps all I can say about Pakistani police. So yeah.
Thanks, guys. Just to come back to you, Awais, there was a particular question from Caroline Gwynne-Jones for you. Do you think you're endangering yourself by writing about the issues that you write about?
I hope not, because like I said, a lot of people in Pakistan don't read novels in English. So the more radical people, they're like more into Urdu novels. So as long as my novel doesn't get translated into Urdu, I think I'm pretty safe. But you can never be sure about in Pakistan. So yeah, one always has to be on their guard, no matter where you're from or who you are. So yeah.
You could be the first writer to turn down a translation deal offer.
I will be, yeah. If there's a deal in Urdu, I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want it, yeah. Because it recently happened to a Pakistani author. His book was out in English for like 12 years. And then he got an Urdu deal in Urdu, and it came out in Urdu language, and everyone was all over him, like, what have you written? And it was mired in controversy. And so, yeah, as long as you're writing in English, you're very much safe. So yeah.
Goodness me, sounds dramatic. Caroline's husband, Phil Gwynne-Jones, asks, on the subject of technology, are the panel going to stay on Twitter in the Elon Musk era? Trevor, let's start with you.
I think that's a definite wait and see. Not one of my favourite people, so we'll see how that goes, I think. I'm sure, as most writers would say, kind of writer Twitter is lovely, mostly.
It is.
It's just entirely engaging. Readers are fantastic. So my Twitter feed is pretty reasonable. I don't really get involved in any of the nonsense that quite a lot of people have to tolerate. Hopefully that will continue. Or maybe we'll just set up our own writer Twitter and just keep it at that. Because that's a lovely place.
I agree, because I found so many people, most of my friends on these past, especially during the pandemic, it has been so useful and so cathartic to be on Twitter and be among friends, writing friends, people who understand you. And I've literally had a great time in London meeting all those people. So I hope not. I'm not going to be leaving. I mean, I don't care if it's Elon Musk or whoever it is, but Twitter is Twitter. So yeah.
I actually had an experience very early on when I joined Twitter of the kind of other side of Twitter. I put a tweet out, and obviously I had like 6 followers at that time, and 2 were bots. So I put this tweet out about Boris Johnson. I'm not going to say what the tweet was, and it got, it just went nuts. And I got all sorts of answers and replies and things. And it was an incredibly scary moment for me. But it happened at just the right time because, I've got a little bit more than 6 followers now. And that was a very useful lesson in where I want to be on social media. I don't want to be in that arena. That was horrendous. I'd rather stay in the kinder arena. But people say, I'm going to go to Instagram. I'm going to leave Twitter and go to Instagram. Instagram's owned by Mark Zuckerberg, people. So that's not exactly any better. Social media is owned by despots. So just choose your despot and have a nice time in your little bubble.
Exactly.
Sounds very reasonable, Louise. I love that. Choose your despot. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. This is from Alex Hawley. Crime is a genre that can deal with many issues. What issues have you not written about yet that you might want to focus upon later? Louise, you can kick off.
Ooh. I don't really know. Trevor mentioned about second homes, and that's a big problem, as you would know as well, Alice, in Wales. And I do find that fascinating, the tensions on the very small coastal villages. Like Abersoch has lost its school, hasn't it, quite recently? I think
I've got that written down on my piece of paper by the side of me. That was one of the articles I read when I was researching mine.
Yeah. And it's just horrendous. I think at some point I would possibly like to do that. I'd need to do a lot of research to make sure you do it justice. But the idea that they become show homes, show villages almost, you know, they're not real. It's like Disneyland. You just turn up, you buy your ice cream, you go to the cove, you have your picture taken for Instagram on the beach, and then you go home and the place is just a shell. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well. It's the same. It's very similar in Northumberland, I think. I went several years ago. I went and played cricket at Bamborough Castle. There's a cricket pitch right next to Bamborough Castle, and the guy was saying this might be our last game because we can't get a team because nobody lives here anymore.
Yeah,
and that's quite a big town, and they couldn't get 11 cricketers. And that was the start of my interest in how second homes kind of almost destroy a community, really.
Awais, are you going to make it 3? Are you going to make
we'll
second homes as well?
Hey, mine's with my editor. I'm ahead of the game here.
I don't know really where to start in Pakistan. Pakistan is full of crimes, so but I do want to. I would sometime maybe one day want to write about the issue of child marriages in Pakistan, because there's so many men in their 30s and 40s marrying 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, as young as 9-year-olds sometimes, and it's like it's ridiculous and it's so disgusting. But somehow, because in the villages you don't really have, I think the law now sort of prohibits girls from being married girls below the age of 16, I think. But even then, this practice goes on in the villages all the time. Even in the cities, nobody really cares about that. So I would like to shed light on that at least, and make sure some sort of legislation goes into effect that actively stops people from doing it. So yeah.
Right. I'd read that book. I would definitely read that book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Those are great answers to the questions, and thanks to the audience also for wonderful questions. I'm now going to hand back to Jacky to bring us to a close.
Alice, thank you so much for fielding the questions there. And yeah, audience, thank you so much for your questions. That's wonderful. It just remains for me to thank Trevor Wood, Awais Khan and Louise Mumford. Thank you so much for our conversation this evening. As ever, there's always questions left to be asked and issues to be discussed, but all the very best with your writing, those stories that are coming out. Please just keep doing what you do. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, and good night.
Thanks, Jacky. Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.